Did you want me to answer? Did you want us to answer your question first,
Yeah.
Eggy,
Yeah.
around why we
Yeah.
joined Eggy? I've lost
Yeah.
Zoom. Where did Zoom go?
I think
Okay.
I think for tech people, it's always like a tough decision to make, like whether they want to go to a startup team or they want to go to a big corporate. So right now I'm working at a tech corporate. Like it's a big company. I used to working in startups. Like I'd like to see how you made that decision. I think.
I can't wait to hear either.
So, so for me personally, I have worked at a variety of different companies. You know, so I've been doing mobile development since 2014. And this will cover some of my talk. So, but yeah, so over that 7 years, I've worked at I've worked at 2 agencies, and I've worked at 3 startups of varying sizes. And so what I found out early on is like agencies are an amazing place to work. You get to work on lots of projects. You get to start a lot of greenfield projects. But for me, what was missing was the ability to own a project, like own something, be part of it, you know, be part of a vision, right? Like a vision and mission to solve a problem. And I really like solving problems, whether or not they be tech problems or other problems. Like tech is a good way of solving problems, and then be part of something, right? Be part of that vision and that drive. And so and that's why I joined PopGun, because it was a small team, you know, moving really fast, iterating and trying to solve a problem. And I was completely burnt out at the end of last year. So like during COVID, and PopGun's is a great place to work, but we were pushed hard, and you know, we had funding, but we had limited runways, and we were pushing for Series A funding. And so I was working, at one point I was working 80-hour weeks, and I was, by the end of last year, I was just totally burnt out. And so I decided to, so the app we were building did really well. Like we hit more than 1 million downloads, but for the app, which was just mind blowing, right? We had like 150,000 monthly active users. So in all cases, like it was a successful app, but the PopGun itself decided to change directions. It decided to focus on game development as opposed to app development. And I don't make games. I'm not a gamer. It's not really my thing. So I decided to move on, and I was looking around, and I saw that I came across Kate and Kirk somehow on LinkedIn, and then started watching some of the videos, and you know, just really got involved in the mission. And it's a problem that I also want to solve, is that problem of life admin. Like, I don't know how much time I spend organizing my bills and then trying to work out where my stuff is between Google Drive and in my Gmail. I've got 3 different Gmails, and you know, and then different to-do lists, and then calendars. And and this is the type of thing that I like to build. So I reached out to Kirk and said, hey, you know, maybe I can help. And the rest was kind of history. We chatted, and then I went away and thought about it, and then decided to you know, why not? Let's join the team. And yeah, for me personally, I like startups. I like to be able to move quickly and test different ideas and solve problems, work in a small team. And, you know, it's as opposed to, you know, in larger companies where you've got lots of overhead and there's lots of people that get in the way of decisions. It's less fun, right? It's for me personally, right? It's like, I like to be able to make a decision and pivot on a dime. So that's me. That's why I decided to join Eggy. And, you know, we caught up with Kate and Kirk, and just immediately fell in love with the culture and, you know, the vision and what they were trying to do. And I realized that they were good people that I wanted to work with. So I'm making it sound like it's entirely my decision. Obviously, you know, they then talked to me, and we're also happy with, you know, thought that I would fit in with the company culture.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Yuris, did you want to quickly decide?
Sure, yeah.
Tell us why you decided to join.
Yeah, sure. So for me, since from uni days, I've always been wanting to build my own company. So my dream was like, oh, I would want to work in a big company and learn how to build a company and then build my own company. Yeah, that's my ideal previously. So after graduating college, yeah, I tried applying jobs into big companies, but I got a chance. I got an offer from Kelvin to start internship in Eggy. Yeah, I took it anyway because I wanted experience. Yeah, and I started thinking, yeah, maybe my previous dream was not actually what I wanted to do. So I still want to build a company, but maybe not going through working on a big company. Maybe learning from a startup company is better for me. And yeah, it is. I get to learn a lot of things. I get to pick Kirk's and Kate's brains and also Calvin's brain. Yeah, so it's been a good experience for me so far. And yeah, that's why I joined Eggy. That's me.
That was much more succinct than me. Well done.
Yeah, I don't want to take more time. Yeah.
Cool. All right, so let's jump into it. So just a quick check. Can everybody see my window, the rapidly prototype and validate your ideas with Flutter Web?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. All right, so let's dive into it. I'll skip over the parts that we've already talked about. So Yuris and I are both presenting this, and might have to switch who's sharing screens at points throughout this presentation. So we'll just see how we go. All right, so this is our team. And you've heard from Kirk already, and this is everybody. So we are a small company. We've got Harry, our designer, on the left, and Rafa, who has been with the company for over 2 years, and then Kate and Kirk, our dream team, our fearless leaders in the middle. So I think I've given my entire background, so I'm not going to go into that again. I started with Eggy in January, I think, is the only thing I might have left out from that. So what I wanted to go through before we actually dive into why we're talking about rapid prototyping, I thought I'd give you a bit of a story around how we got there. Why are we prototyping? What's the point of that? And how did we get to the point where we as a company wanted to prototype? And so as Kirk went over, we released the native iOS app before my time, May last year. And so obviously, we were only supporting iOS, and it got to the point where it's okay, well, we want to support Android as well. We don't want to have the overhead of 2 separate code bases. That makes it really hard to move forward. You're writing the code twice. It's a very difficult, especially in a small team, right? It's very hard to move quickly when you're supporting 2 or 3 code bases, right? If you include web as well, then you've got a 3rd code base. And so this is where Flutter really came into it. So I caught up with Kirk late last year. We just sat down for a coffee and just had a chat about different mobile development technologies and maybe what the right choice was for Eggy. And we discussed React Native versus Kotlin multi-platform versus the benefits of Flutter. And that's quite a long discussion that I'm not going to get into too much. But we decided on Flutter, and the summary of that is you can build a really high quality product, you can move really quickly. And I think key of all is that you can build a product first and then choose a platform, which is the total opposite of what you would normally do when building a mobile app. Okay, I have the normal flow. I have an idea. I have an iPhone, so I'll build it on iPhone, or I have an Android phone, so I'll build it for Android. Right? So you have to pick the platform first, and then you build using the technologies provided by that platform, and you're locked into that platform unless you want to rebuild the app a second time for the other platform. Whereas Flutter completely flips that on its head. It's okay, I have an idea. I'm going to build that idea, and then I can see how it goes, and I can publish it to multiple different platforms and see which platform works best for me. So, as of speaking right now, Android, iOS, and web are all first-class citizens of Flutter. And the desktop platforms are coming. So they're working on native Mac, Windows, and Linux support for Flutter apps as well. So from a single code base, you're able to pick your destination. And I can't stress how much of an advantage that is over the regular paradigm for mobile development. And to give you a concrete example, so I mentioned earlier, the Splash Music app from Popgun had I think it was about 1.1 million downloads by the time we shut it down. Of those 1.1 million downloads, over 90% were on Android. Before we made the decision to go with Flutter, we were going to build it as a native iOS app, because you always build for iOS first. in my experience, every company I've worked at, you build for iOS first, and then Android is this kind of second-class citizen that gets an app eventually. If we had have done that, the Splash mobile app would have fallen on its head. Within a couple of months, we wouldn't have had any traction. We would have had a couple of thousand downloads. We might have got a couple hundred downloads, or maybe a couple of thousand downloads a week. But because we could publish on both, we published on Android, and then we were getting 20 to 50,000 downloads a week on Android. And so, not to get into that too much, but if we hadn't have been able to build the product first and then choose a platform, we would have been dead. And so that's a real benefit of Flutter, and that's kind of the key reason as to why we decided when rebuilding the app, let's rebuild it in Flutter. So let's talk about the rebuild. There are traps when you rebuild an app from one technology to another. And I don't know if you know, I don't know if everybody knows the Netscape browser, but I think it was Netscape 3. For Netscape 4, they were like, it could be Netscape 4 to 5. I can't remember the exact details, but they're like, let's rebuild this in C++. It'll be much better. It'll be much better. That version never came out because during the rebuild, they're trying to add new features and they're trying to, revolutionize this browser, but they never got to market. They never rebuilt it. And so, this trap with when you rebuild, it's really easy to think, I'll just add this feature while I rebuild, and I'll just add this feature while I rebuild. But there is no way to validate those ideas, because you can't give somebody, if you've got thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people using an app, you can't then give them a half-baked version of a new app to then be able to test and validate some ideas, right? You have to give them at least a fully functional app, and that works to the same level as what your existing product does before you can, start adding new things. And so we drew a line in the sand and we're like, okay, we're rebuilding in Flutter. We'll update the designs so that we've got a consistent look and feel between Android and iOS, but we're not going to add any new features. And because of that, we managed to smash out the rebuild in 4 months, from January through to April. And so that brings us close to where we are. So by the beginning of May, we got the app out on Android and iOS. We've got people downloading it, and then we get to the point where we're like, okay, now we can add some new features. So now we get to the point where it's like, okay, what do we build? What can we add to the app now that's going to add the maximum value for our users to get us towards our mission and vision of Eggy, which is to solve the problem of life admin. We want to be the place that you put everything that life throws at you, all of the information, all of the documents, all of the blah that you have to deal with. We want to be that app that you pull out of your pocket and you throw your data into it, and then we intelligently organize your life for you. And that's the goal, right? And that's what we're working towards. But how do we choose what to build? And then also, how do we know if what we've built solves the problem? And this is where validation is very important. Like, we need to build things and test them as quick as we can, get it into people's hands and validate whether an idea is going to work. And so, so this is where we talk about prototyping. Prototyping is an ideal way to go about that. So before we dive any further into this, the two things we would like you as an audience to get out of our talk tonight is the technique that we've developed useful to you? So as a solo developer or a non-technical founder, whether or not you're building a new product or you're already in market, could prototyping with Flutter Web, rapid prototyping with Flutter Web, be something of benefit to you? Because it may not be right. It's not right in all circumstances. And the second part of that is, are my slides updating? Can you see an orange slide?
Yeah, but it's sometimes chopped in the middle.
Before, yes, sometimes it's messed up. I don't know why.
All right, so yes, is the technique useful to you? And the second part is, if it is useful, if you come away from this going, oh, wow, that's amazing, I really want to use that, we want to give you enough information so that you could actually use the technique. And so that's the two parts. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the talk. Is this technique useful to you? And if so, how could you use it? Now, let's talk prototyping. Prototyping is a massive topic, and there are lots of ways of prototyping. There's different prototypes which are valid for different use cases. but I'm going to grossly oversimplify and put it onto a spectrum from, one side to the other. So at one side of prototyping, you've got designs which have some basic interaction, right? Which is like, okay, I can see some buttons on a screen, I can tap on a button and it transitions to another screen. This is something that you could build with Balsamic or Figma clickable prototypes. Just something simple. It gives you a basic idea of how things will look on a screen and more or less how they'll work. And we do that internally. That is a prototyping technique that we use, and it's the right technique for some things, right? And we're not trying to replace that. That's prototyping with Flutter Web isn't that. So the other end of the spectrum is you want to build a real piece of software that people can use and interact with that actually solves a problem, but maybe isn't fully polished. Like it's not releasable, but it's something you could put on your phone and use to solve a problem and interact with. Now, it may not be fully interactive. Maybe it's just a part of an application, or like a part of the problem, like it solves part of the problem. But that's the idea, right? Where you've got, this is what we're trying to replicate here, is we want to be able to give something to our users that they can use, and it looks and feels, we don't have to tell them how it's going to work. They can play with it and get an idea. And that's the rapid prototyping that we've come up with a solution to. It's the problem we're trying to solve today. So why? And Yuris will really get into the nuts and bolts of this. What is the problem we're trying to solve? He'll look at like, why are we using Flutter for web instead of just prototyping with native mobile apps and distributing those, or why not just use native web technologies instead of which is native for web. So why just use native web like React or something like that to build your prototypes? So I'm going to hand over. Yuris, do you want to take over screen share?
Yeah, sure. Can you drop your screen first? Okay,
yes,
thank
sorry.
you. That's all right. Yeah, give me 1 sec. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
I'm gonna test. I'm gonna check navigating to other pages. Is it working properly?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
awesome.
good.
Cool. So yeah, to explain why we used Flutter Web, I'm gonna start with a real scenario here. This is what actually happened in Eggy, but I'm gonna just modify it a bit so that it's easier to understand. So yeah, as a mobile app developer, my normal workflow would be just plug my phone onto my laptop, start building the app in my laptop, and then see the result on my mobile phone. And then I would iterate over that until I get the result that I want, or until I finish the task. Yeah. So let's say I'm working, hang on, where's it not? Okay, yeah. Let's say I'm working on one feature of Eggy, which is adding a document. Here I'm presented with a bottom sheet, transitioning onto another bottom sheet with different height. So yeah, let's say I finished that. And turns out the animation that the design team intended does not work well on the app. Like, for example, the designer created a very complex animation that's not actually supported in real applications. Yeah, having discussion with the designer, we decided to explore on the other options that we can do for the animation. So after exploring other types of animations, we decided to have these 3 different animations to test. So we have ease in, bounce, or linear animations. Yeah, here comes the challenging part. We want to test different sets of animations, but we want to run it directly onto the application, onto the device, because we don't want to use a design tool anymore. It could create more friction, because yeah, it could create the same problem that basically we're trying to solve. And yeah, the challenging part is, what if we want to have user feedback on each different animations? Yeah, in normal mobile app development, we will have to distribute the different animations onto different versions of applications. So to go through that, we'll have to go through store reviews, which means that we publish the application onto the Play Store or App Store and then get them review our prototypes or our different versions. And then, yeah, we'll have to basically to have some more time to get it published to the users. Yeah, and another problem is, what if we want to deploy, well, if we want to publish another versions of applications, another animations, for example, do we create another version and publish it on the Play Store as well? Well, one might argue, if someone's familiar with A/B testing, why don't we just use A/B testing? Well, using Flutter, we have another way to work around that. So to recap the problem, so we just discussed about the problem of publishing to stores. Well, that's not the only problem. We have another problem, like we will have to notify the users that we just published application, and we will need them to install our prototype to test our prototype. And that creates friction, downloading and installing. And then also installing multiple versions side by side. Like, for example, we have multiple prototypes. Yeah, users will have to install different apps, and it's also creating another technical challenge for the developers. And yeah, there's also problems with throwaway prototypes. Yeah, some of the prototypes may not be able, some part of the code of the prototype may not be able to be reused on the actual apps. Yeah, we'll get onto that more.
There, Yuris?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't think you can, unless you've built for those of you who have built a mobile app, you would know just how many hoops the stores make you jump through to be able to put an app in someone's hands. So to give you an idea, right, you need to upload an app to the store, so just say you're trying to publish to Android and iOS, well, then you've got to build an Android version and an iOS version. If you're uploading them manually, you're literally dragging and dropping or using some piece of software to upload a 100 meg file into the store. So to build it, it takes like 15-20 minutes per platform, and then to upload it takes another 5 or so minutes. And then to get into people's hands, it needs to be reviewed. Both Google now does reviews and iOS do reviews. And so even just getting the build into the store takes you an hour.
Yep.
And then you've got to wait a couple of days for them to review it and for them to say, oh, hey, okay, we accept that you can show this to people. And then there's only one way that they can there's only one version of the app they can put on their phone at a time. Otherwise, they have to, you have to go through that whole process again, setting up a new listing on Android on the Google Play Store, a new listing on iOS, upload it again. It's a really horribly painful process. Whereas any web developers would know, it's really easy to grab a link and send it to somebody in a text message or via Slack, and they can click on it and it's in their browser. It's really hard to emphasize how good that is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, in terms of like the throwaway prototypes, if you build this in another technology, it's kind of throwaway, right? Like if we're building a Flutter app, well, and then we build a prototype using React, well, that's great and it'll be quick, but it's a different technology set, it's a different language, it's extra overhead in terms of learning it, but the code's not reusable. I can't reuse that JavaScript code in my app. Whereas if I build like a happy path prototype that's fully functional and share that with people in Flutter, well then if I built 3 or 4 different versions, at least if I pick one of those, well, I've already got the code and I can just continue on that to polish it and turn it into a real app as opposed to starting from scratch. Sorry, Yuris.
That's okay. Yeah, thanks, Kelvin, for clarifying the points that I missed. Yeah. So continuing on that, yeah. So because of the problems, we want to solve all of them. So we came up with an idea. We know that Flutter supports web, and yeah, why don't we use that? So we were thinking to just deploy our mobile apps into websites. So by doing it this way, we could get over the problem of going through the store reviews and the wait times, and also we could also get over the problems of users having to install. Yeah, that eliminates all the frictions. We need to deploy just the prototypes, and the good thing about it is that we can also add analytics to our prototypes. so that we can also see how the user interacts with the prototype. And yeah, that's basically solving the problem and having a better solution. Yeah, but before deploying to the website, we have some things to consider. The first thing is the app dependency. So basically, app dependency is some pieces of code that you use. Some pieces of code some part of it may not be able to be deployed to the website because it may communicate with the iOS or Android device internally. So yeah, we will need to either change the dependency or eliminate the dependency so that we can deploy to the website. This brings us to the next part, which is project structure. Having a good project structure would actually solve the problem for application dependency. So we're gonna talk about project structure next. So previously, our project structure is just a single app module. So this thing has all the code for Android and iOS and the app dependency that we have for just Android and iOS. This is just a single monolithic module. To be able to deploy to the website, we had to change the project structure like so. So we separated the single module into 3 different modules. So now we have app module, core module, and prototype module. So yeah, we have core module. This is basically all the things that we need to build the app. And then app module is like all the codes that is depending on that is using the core module. And this is the module that we are actually publishing to the Play Store or App Store. So this is for the mobile apps. And beside app module, we have prototype module that is also depending on core module. So having prototype module and app modules separated, we don't actually need to worry about packages anymore, dependencies anymore. So we can go crazy with the prototype module and just experiment with it. And yeah, that solves the problem. And we get to the point of deployment. So after having the project structure organized, we looked for a way to deploy our prototypes. We found a good platform to deploy our prototypes, which is Firebase hosting. I included the documentation here if anyone wants to have a look. So Firebase is a cloud platform that is actually giving you many services. One of them is hosting. So we use the hosting service to deploy our prototype. And yeah, this is basically all the solution we need. If we have other prototype, we just deploy it to another website. And yeah, that's it. Actually, for deploying to Firebase, there are steps that you need to do, but we built a script to deploy it easily. So you can just use one command line to deploy your prototype onto Firebase hosting. We can actually make it open source if you guys are interested. So yeah, just hit us up if you want to have the script. And here's the result for our prototypes that have been deployed. Both of them are for adding, just simple prototypes for one of our features. You guys can have a look and play around with it. Okay, I'm gonna give a few seconds for you guys to scan. Sure, Kelvin. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh my God, that is so cool.
So I just wanted to give.
That is so cool. I still get excited about that. I know it's our prototype, but I still get excited about that.
Yeah. So these prototypes are actual prototypes that we built for to help us make a decision. So just to give a little bit of a story, right? Adding things to Eggy is super important. And so, because that's the idea, right? Like we want to get everything out of your head and out of your life and into Eggy so you don't have to worry about it. And so this flow of adding, we all had ideas. And I was being stubborn. I was convinced I was right and that my idea was what we should build. Our designer Harry had a great idea and stuck. And we're like, okay, how can we decide? How can we make the decision? So we built these prototypes. These are 2 of them. We built 4 in total, I think. And so, this is where the beauty of this technique came up. I went to my wife, I gave her the links, and on her phone, she opened up 3 different tabs with 3 of the different prototypes on it. And so, and I didn't tell her which one was my idea. I just loaded them all on, and I'm like, okay, blind test. Which one of these do you think is the better way?
Are you being honest? Are you being honest? Yeah. Did you tell her?
Well. So I showed her mine first. She didn't know it was mine. And she opened it up and I'm like, okay, so put yourself in the situation. You want to put something into Eggy. All right, so this is the flow. And so she hit the add button and she went through my flow and she looks at me for my flow and she says, I hate it. I think this is terrible. And then she tested the other 2 flows and yeah, she liked Kate's idea better than mine and broke my heart. But it was brilliant, right? Because it was a really good way for me to get past my idea, right? Like I was convinced I was right and I wasn't, I was wrong. But it also helped us as a company within a couple of days, build a whole bunch of prototypes and then, actually put this in the hands of people. My wife would not, 100% would not install another version of the app on her phone through TestFlight or going through Google Play, signing up for a beta link. She's just not going to do it. Like unless it's as easy as tapping on a link, it's not happening. And I don't know if you've ever tried to talk your friend, non-technical friend or relative through installing an app through TestFlight or getting on the Google Play beta or alpha list. It's not easy. It's it's no. Whereas again, sending them a link is easy and everybody can tap on a link and open it in a browser on their phone or on their computer. So anyway,
Kelvin, I want to jump in here and really highlight that point, and I think everyone misses it. I mean, I've read the books. Everyone says this, like, yeah. Get feedback from your customers, get feedback from your users, your potential ICP. But that's the hardest thing. They don't talk about how challenging that actually is. And sorry, mate, I just had to jump in and highlight that point, just how easy that makes this process. It's like, that's the gold, right? Boom, I'm out.
Yuris, do you want to just keep sharing and go to the next slide?
Yeah, sure.
Just to wrap up, let's see if we can answer the questions that we started off with. Like, is this useful for you? And if so, and Yuris has covered over the details around how you would go about and do that. Sorry, I'm just getting through to my notes here. So did this work for us? And the short answer is yes, it did work, but you have to, that comes with some caveats, right? So we're an early stage startup. We don't have revenue. We've got a limited runway. So we can't prototype everything. Otherwise, regardless of how quick it is to prototype, you can't prototype every decision, right? You've got to just make some decisions. And we're lucky that we have our co-CEO, Kate, who it falls into the demographic of the users. She falls into that target demographic. And she reads all the feedback and she has a very good idea of what will work and what won't work. So most of the time, we make a gut feeling approach, or she makes a gut feeling approach on what the right thing to build is. So yeah, this does work. And if we're stuck and we don't know what to build, then we can use this prototyping method. But most of the time we're still just bang, let's just build it, ship it, get it out there and get feedback and iterate on it that way through the mobile app. So based on that, who is this good for? It's established mobile apps. Do you want to move on to the next slide, Yuris? So an established app written in Flutter, this is a great technique, right? Because you've already got your code in Flutter. If you've made the right decisions early on, this can be much easier. So one of the dependencies that we have that doesn't support Flutter for web is Amazon Cognito. Amazon's Amplify Cognito. Honestly, if you're going to build an app, I would not recommend using Cognito for your authentication management system. It's been a headache. Even when we were using native iOS, it was a headache. Now on Flutter, it's kind of half supported. I think there's a couple of people working on it half time compared to, say, the Firebase the Firebase authentication system, it's really not great. And we're investigating whether or not it's worth migrating away from Amazon to Firebase so that we can support web and also have a product that's got decent support where they actually fix bugs. Like I came across a bug that they marked as high priority, and that was 5 years ago and they still haven't fixed it, right? So anyway, and so if you have an existing Flutter app, this is a pretty good technique. And if your app is easily able to be turned into a web app, then this is a great way for you to test ideas. The other case, next slide. The other case is that if you have a new app idea that isn't built yet, I've never seen a way that you can build an app, build an idea so quickly and publish it and get it into people's hands as you can today with Flutter and Firebase. And Google isn't sponsoring this, Firebase isn't sponsoring this. This is just my experience using Firebase and seeing how invested the Firebase team is in supporting Flutter and Flutter for web, Flutter on mobile, and upcoming support for Flutter desktop. So between, if you chose Firebase hosting, Firebase authentication, and Cloud Firestore for your database, you could build, excuse me, you could get a prototype built in a matter of days and get it into people's hands and get an idea out of your head and test it and validate it and see if anybody cares about it in record time. And then decide whether or not it's worth spending all the effort to, spend the hours it takes to set up a CI, a continuous integration and deployment service, and then spend the hours setting up the Google Play Store listings and the App Store listings and going through all of the hoops that the stores make you go through. Because you may not even need that. Maybe web is a good enough platform for you. So this is where it is an excellent fit. It's not a good fit if you're not using, if you have an established app and it's not written in Flutter and you have no interest in changing the technology that you're using, then yeah, you're probably not going to benefit a whole lot from this technique, right? Like if you're using React Native has a bunch, is a great technology in its own right and is a good use case in many circumstances. And it has its own ways for you to do rapid prototyping and develop. For Xamarin and native Android and native iOS, well, you're not going to get any code reuse if you use Flutter. You're adding a new language and a new technology stack. It's, there might be a use case for it, but probably not. And if you're building for web, well, you've already got all these benefits, right? So yeah, it's probably not for you if you fall into those buckets. Did I miss anything?
Nope, all good.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, question time.
Yeah, we got a few questions for you guys, and Kirk is still there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I think we missed one question to you. So the question is so we'll do this one before we go to Kelvin and Yuris. So the question is who are the competitors for Eggy? So we think they think there are a few companies that can do a few things of Eggy, but maybe not all of what Eggy does.
Yeah, well, I think, mate, there's probably two distinctions here. Is that one, how do people currently manage life admin? And obviously the obvious ones are Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive. Then you've got your calendar apps. So obviously Google have that sorted as well. Again, Outlook, all these different functionalities. We're seeing some sort of life tech solutions coming on the market at the moment, like Life Sorted. There's an app called Get Reminded that sort of do different things. And I think people focus on the different aspects of life admin, like payments. There's heaps of competitors in payments. Everyone knows the fintech strategy, the whole calendar apps and document storage. And yeah, we're sort of trying to focus on, we actually think that we're nailing a problem that they're all missing, and that's the whole cognitive load, the whole, cognitive load, the problem with, organizing your information. Life's information in the one place working for you, mate. So, yeah, buddy, I hope that answered the question, all right?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So to Kelvin and Yuris, so the question is Flutter has a lot of advantages Are there any disadvantages?
Yeah. So can I answer that, Kelvin?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Just jump in if you want to. Yeah. So in my experience working on Flutter, so there was this one bitter experience. It's related to one package. So not all native features are supported well. So in our case, it was sharing extension. So if you're familiar with the share button on iOS or Android, it would open Sheet, and there was not enough package. There's not enough library to handle that. So they have their own package, the official Flutter package, sharing package, but for sharing from external app into our app, it's not supported. So someone else had to create it, and it was not a good package. So we have to basically implement our own. Just edit the implementation and fix the bugs to make it work. That took a lot of our time just to make a simple feature that's supposed to be implemented, that has to be implemented by out of the box. Yeah, that's me. Kelvin, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's a bunch of pros and cons with Flutter, as like every other technology, right? So for example, like if you're going hybrid, like if you're going this whole multi-platform solution, there are a number of technologies out there now. I think the result that you get in the amount of code sharing you get on Flutter is the best, and it supports the most number of platforms, right? Like you get an app that is very responsive, fully compiled to native code on both platforms. It's you get a really high quality output. But a disadvantage is that you still have to go through the regular distribution channels to get your app out to users, right? You still have to go through Google Play and Apple App Store and go through a review every time you want to release an update. I'm sorry, I've just got something. Apologies. Whereas if you look at React Native as a direct competitor, probably the other major choice I would look at when evaluating cross-platform solutions. React Native has the ability you have to ship the frame onto people's phone, but then you can send as many updates as you want. Like you basically ship a container, and then you can ship JavaScript bundle updates. And so the React Native apps I've worked on, you can be pushing updates 4 or 5 times a day, and people wouldn't even notice. Next time they open the app, they just get the new functionality. And so, Flutter doesn't have that. And that's a really strong selling point for React Native. Being able to, especially in an early stage startup when you want to be adding features quickly. Sure, the app probably won't look as good. It probably won't, there's some things React Native, it's really hard with a small team to get things working perfectly. But on the upside, again, you're iterating really quickly. And then, building for a native platform is unbeatable if you want native platform integration. Like if you want access to all of the sensors, if you want the latest and greatest on each platform, well, then there's nothing better than building native for that platform. We built a music app with Flutter, and you can do that as well. But again, it's not going to give you the same kind of experience as maybe building a music app natively on iOS. So there's definitely cons, and it's not the right choice for every project. It is the right choice for many projects though, especially like things that don't need heavy system integration.
Cool. The next question is like, are there any mobile features that you can't really test in this way?
Normal feature. Do you want to answer that, Kelvin?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm going to keep coughing. I don't know, something seems stuck in my throat. So it's hard to test camera-related features or any deep operating system integrations, right? Like anything that's less UI focused and more operating system integration, you're not going to be able to test this way. This is more, right, like you've got user flows or data management or form inputs or things that are data related. This works really well, but anything deep operating system, you're not going to be able to test.
Cool. The next question is very specific. So would it be a big job for my developer to move things from AWS to Firebase so that we can use this technique as in the directory?
You don't actually need to migrate all your services into Firebase just for this. So for Firebase, in this technique, we're only using the hosting service, which is not related to any other cloud service like authentication or anything. So deploying to Firebase hosting will just be deploying your compiled application into the server. That's it. Hopefully that answers it.
To expand on that, it depends on, if you want to do prototyping, you can use a similar technique that we've used, like separate out your core logic into a separate module and then build a web specific module. But if you're using Cognito for your authentication service and you want to actually deploy your whole application to the web, which is a huge draw card for Flutter, then it's possible, but it's work trying to migrate away from Amazon Cognito, AWS Cognito to Firebase. We've done some basic technical validation as to how possible it is, and it doesn't take much work to actually change your app over from using the Cognito SDK to using the Firebase SDK, but you've got to get all your users from AWS over to Firebase. The research I've done shows that that's possible. You can run a script that will take all your users out in batches of 1,000 and write them into Firebase. But there's kind of the edge cases where it's like, okay, what happens if I've got somebody using an old version of the app and then they sign up for an account using the old AWS library? Then somehow I've got to get them over to the new version. Like if I run all my migrations and move all of my users, then how do I stop people signing up on the old version? There are some hurdles there. There is work. I think we've budgeted a rough guess about 2 weeks worth of work for one person to migrate authentication services. But if it's not authentication related, like if you're using just your backend hosted on AWS, well, that's fine. You don't need to migrate. You can use any API. Because we're not going to move we use AWS Lambda for all of our API endpoints, and that works fine with Flutter for web as well as it does for Flutter natively.
Cool. I think maybe the last question. So you mentioned you have 3 modules: the app module, core module, and the prototype module. How do you manage that? Do you have different repositories or something? Just briefly, how do you manage it? How do you make it work?
I think it's better for Kelvin to answer this, but a simple answer for that is no, they're not in the different repositories. They are in the same repositories. So Kelvin, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is one of the things I added to our handbook when I started is prefer less repositories. When you're working in a small team and you only have one team, you want to decrease the surface area and decrease the things that you need to manage as much as possible. So I would have all of our backend code in the same repository as our front end code if possible as well, because it just means that everybody is working and everybody can see everything that's happening and you don't have things hidden in other repositories. So we have multiple modules inside a single monorepo. And it's pretty easy it's actually it's not much management overhead. You just need to, the only thing that you really need to remember is if you're updating packages, you have to update them in all of your modules. So in your core module and then obviously there's a little bit of an architectural component that you need to think about, right? Where if you have things in a core module, you might have some interfaces for your, so just say you have a repository pattern, using the repository pattern for fetching your data. You might want to have the interfaces in your core module, but have the implementations in your app module. And therefore you need to use some sort of dependency injection framework to pull out the actual implementations at runtime during the app. So there's a little bit of kind of cognitive overhead there, but if you're using typical design patterns, it's really not hard.